News for New York. This is a special edition of News Forum. Decision 93, the New Jersey gubernatorial debate.
Good morning. I'm Gabe Pressman, and WNBC here in New York, in cooperation with KYW in Philadelphia, are glad to present the third and final debate in the campaign for Governor of New Jersey, simulcast live on both stations on this Sunday morning. With us on this special expanded version of News Forum are the candidates, the challenger, Republican Christine Whitman, and the governor who's seeking a second term, Democrat Jim Florio. Welcome to both of you. I'm happy to welcome too anchor reporter Larry Kean of KYW in Philadelphia. We'll both be questioning the candidates, and the format is simple, a free-flowing discussion of the issues. Each of you will have a reasonable time to respond to each question, and you'll have a chance to comment on your opponent's answers. We'll try to give each of you equal opportunity. Only if necessary, we'll use this stopwatch here to limit the length of replies. At the end, each of you will be allowed a last word to the voters of New Jersey, and the order has been determined by a coin flip already. Let me start out by saying that, asking you about this. In each of your previous two debates, each has accused the other of negative campaigning, of ethical violations in your public life. Do you think that character properly is an issue in this campaign, and how would you define the difference in character between you?
I think character is definitely an issue in the sense that translates into your ability to handle government and what happens in government and the standards that are set for those who serve, because that has a very direct impact on the public, because you find instances where you have abuse of funds. That happens and can happen throughout government. So it becomes very important what the standards are of the individuals who are setting the tone. And the governor is the leader. The governor sets the tone. And in spite of all that goes around a governor, while they may not be personally and directly responsible, they certainly have the responsibility of setting the tone.
How would you define the difference between you and this governor in terms of character?
In terms of character? Well, I think we both believe deeply in what it is we want to do. I believe in the people of the state of New Jersey and their ability to make decisions that affect their lives, and the importance of allowing them into the process so they have a role to play in the process. And it comes from a deep belief that consensus is the best way to build policy, and when you bring people into the process, that's how you build the best kind of governance.
And you don't think that Jim Florio believes that?
I haven't seen a whole lot of examples of that in his carrying out his policy heretofore.
Governor, you think that character's a key issue here?
Oh, certainly it is. I mean,
how do you respond to that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, there's nothing that was said that I would disagree with. I mean, character also manifests itself in terms of who is willing to make tough decisions. I don't think there's any question about the fact that I've been willing to make some tough decisions, not all of which were uniformly applauded, at first blush, but you're not talking about the next day's polls. You really should be talking about the long haul. Likewise, I think that credibility is a very important component of character that will allow people to make a determination as to who really has some substance and who is it that understands the complexities of the things that you have to deal with. These are not times when you can have bumper sticker answers to the problems that we have. You can't be out just pandering to people, telling people what they want to hear all the time.
Let's deal with a couple of negative things that each of you has said about each other. Ms. Whitman, as a freeholder, the governor has accused you of putting the taxpayers' money into banks that were controlled by your family. True or false?
Well, I didn't do it. The Freeholder Board had a relationship with that particular bank for 10 years before I got onto the board, and continued it long after, and it didn't increase or decrease proportionally while I was there. And in fact, I abstained from several of the votes that had to do with ensuring that that bank was a player in the bonding.
Well, the governor called that as blatant a conflict of interest as I've ever seen.
It doesn't
or ever
rise
heard.
to the kind of situations that he finds his administration in, with 2 grand juries investigating the administration, a Securities Exchange Commission investigating for bond dealing. We are talking about something that was well known to the public, well known to the press, never any allegation or that there was anything improper on what went on. And yet we have an administration now that finds itself in a position of having it being reviewed by grand juries, by Security Exchange Commissions, and by an extraordinary number, having an extraordinary number of allegations raised in the press that really trouble the public's consciousness.
Governor, did you know nothing about the
Gabe, let me just respond to the other point, though. I mean, again, this is sort of a real indication of some degree of sensitivity or insensitivity. You're on the board of freeholders. You not only vote, but you offer the resolution to put the county's money into the bank that you and your family have a substantial interest in and you benefit from. You ultimately go on to the board of trustees of the bank. Now, whether there was any venality here, whether anybody was doing anything that was inappropriate, it is clearly something, a conflict of interest.
Well, I'm glad to see if we're holding those kinds of standards, and the governor certainly must feel that his signing an election report that was submitted by his campaign very recently that admitted to 15 violations of election law is something that for which he takes some accountability and responsibility. And his attorney for the campaign even went into court and admitted that 15 times it was just too difficult to abide by laws. And that's just unacceptable. They're not a suggestion.
This is a kind of an interesting thing because there's been no determination on this. What has been determined is that Mrs. Whitman violated the federal election laws. This is not speculation. That's been already determined.
How did she violate the election laws?
We didn't. We didn't. There's been no determination
whatsoever.
whatsoever.
You're saying that
she's saying allegations
You're saying
made.
she's jumped.
No, they admitted it. You should see that the brief. He said his counsel, the governor's counsel, the campaign's counsel said it was too difficult to comply. Therefore, we didn't.
It is
15 times.
It is now before the agency,
Just
and the
read the
determination will be made. I mean, allegations, we've had all kinds of allegations, as one expects, in 3 or 4 weeks before an election. But I guess the key is, I mean, there's a certain amount of chutzpah to be saying somebody else went and violated the law when you yourself have been charged and found guilty already.
Well, I'd like to go to some of the things that she's accused you of, but Larry Kean, what do you want to...
I'm really curious, listening to both of you here and watching your previous discussions. Don't you think the voters of New Jersey deserve a better campaign? I mean, hasn't the climate of this campaign been kind of nasty, Governor?
Well, it's interesting because these are the questions that are coming forward. Now, I would be more than happy to say how I think that, for example, Mrs. Whitman's been very critical of some of the things that we've done economically in the state. I'm more than happy to compare our ability to bring property taxes down in the last couple of years with Mrs. Whitman's proposal now, which everyone, all the editorial boards this morning that endorsed my candidacy, many of them made reference to the fact they were troubled by her plan resulting in property taxes going back up. So I don't have any difficulty talking about the economics that we want to talk about.
Oh,
so let's go there and we'll be happy to talk.
I wish we'd had more of that.
Well, let's get on to that issue for a second. Let's talk about the economic issue.
All right, Larry, we'll do that, but I'd like to get back to whatever vulnerability the governor has on the issue of ethics in government. In fairness to Ms. Whitman, since we talked about her, the allegation that her family's banks received some of the funds when she was a freeholder. But go ahead.
Okay, the question that I wanted to ask was, and let's get to that issue right now. What about the grand jury investigation she mentioned?
There are investigations that are going on all the time. I mean, I guess, again, Mrs. Whitman has brought these things up, and it's just interesting that, I mean, she is the one that's been found guilty of violating the law for hiring illegal aliens. She is the one that's been fined by the IRS for not paying her taxes. No one has ever asserted,
Jim, would you
no
get
one has
that
ever
right
asserted
just once?
that I have in any way done anything that is wrong.
When we talk about ethics, and he sits there and say, we've been fined for not paying our taxes.
Okay, whose
we
taxes
were never
fined
for not paying our taxes, Jim, and let's get this straight.
This is sort of the height of
he goes again and again and again. For someone whose administration
let's lay it right out on the table.
All right, let's lay it right out on the table. Why don't you explain once, and then we'll get to you on the grand jury business. What happened with the illegal alien business? Tell us.
In 1986, we hired a couple that did not have their green card. And we did not pay Social Security on it because they didn't have a Social Security number. We brought that to the public's attention before anybody asked a question and have paid all back taxes and any fine that was there. But it was not our taxes. The governor stood up there in the debate and said that we were fined for non-payment of our income taxes, and that's absolutely wrong. He talks about wanting to run on issues, and yet his first 2 campaign advertisements, and most of them, he didn't even mention himself. He wasn't there. It was all negative.
Okay, we got your answer on that. Let's get your answer on the grand jury situation. You mentioned several grand jury investigations, which grand jury is a heck of a word. What does that mean? What's going on here?
It doesn't mean anything in the sense that there's been no allegations that have been put forward. There are grand juries running all the time. There are investigations going on all the time. And I have no difficulty. When someone is pointed out as having done something wrong, we will take action. There has been no such determination.
Specifically, Governor, in the case of your former Chief of Staff, Joe Salema, did you know nothing about his firm having connections to state bond business?
Well, he, like Mrs. Whitman, put his assets in a blind trust. We've gone so far now because the blind trust mechanism doesn't work, apparently, to protect the person who puts the assets in the blind trust or the public. I have signed an executive order ending all blind trusts. I have signed an executive order saying that, and it was the first thing I did when I came into office, that everyone has to disclose everything that they own.
Was it a mistake, or was it not a mistake for Mr. Salema to be a member of your administration in a high place and still tied to a company?
And to put his assets in a blind trust, with hindsight, change the process. Blind trust no longer will insulate anyone from charges or from speculation. That's why we've ended the whole process.
Gabe, you know, one thing that was interesting, though, in the Kean administration, blind trust did not allow you to put the kinds of things that Joe Salema put into a blind trust, closely held corporations in blind trust. That was changed in this administration, benefited Joe Salema, apparently, or would seem to, over those are the allegations, however you want to phrase it. But let's get that part straight as well.
But you think that there is a built-in conflict of interest in people having ties to corporations or to firms that indirectly or directly have business with the state?
Well, that's why we've ended the whole process. That we've not only ended that, we've ended the whole idea of being able to have anything other than bidding for leases, bonds, because the whole process is changing. Reference was made to the SEC before. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, is having a nationwide evaluation of the adequacies of the laws with regard to municipal bonds on Wall Street. Not just New Jersey, a whole lot of states. I suspect next year what will happen is they'll change all the rules. As long as the rules were what they were, everyone complied with all the laws.
With hindsight, do you both think you made a mistake in the past?
Anybody who would ever sit anywhere and say they've never made mistakes would be incredibly naive.
In connection with this ethical question, I mean, the one that we've been discussing.
I certainly hope that he thinks he's made mistakes as far as bond dealings has gone, and I certainly will admit to have made mistakes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think we ought to get to an issue that is really an issue in our New Jersey and throughout the state, the area that we cover, South and Central New Jersey, and that is education. And not just the way money is dispersed for education, but sort of a hidden agenda there. And the hidden agenda is that there are thousands of parents watching this program who send their children to school with fear that they might be hurt. We have metal detectors in some of our schools throughout the country. This is an American dilemma. And as a governor of a large state, what kind of action can you take to make sure that the educational process is secure?
Well, we take great pride in being the only state in the nation that has started programs called the STAR program, which is in schools, particularly the middle grades, the middle school grades, of trying to educate young children about the problems associated with violence, alternatives for conflict resolution, and dealing with guns and other weapons in the school.
But in the meantime, the guns are there.
No.
Okay.
We had Jim Brady came in this week, and he said some nice things about our ban on assault weapons, but he also was taking a certain degree of pride in the fact that his wife, Sarah Brady, had come in and helped us establish this program. There's a school district, Piscataway, in the township of Piscataway, that's had this program in effect for about a year now. They have seen a noticeable fall-off in violence. The weapons that have been confiscated, not all of them were guns, some were knives and other types of things, have been down dramatically. So we've come to understand that education, in the same way we've had success in educating young kids about the problems associated with drugs, we likewise are now in the process of having some degree of success in trying to educate people and children about the problems associated with weapons.
It's interesting that just this fall, the Commissioner of Education was forced to say that she had to undertake a whole new study about violence in the schools because it had been rising at such a great rate in our schools. And that is something that is absolutely unacceptable. Parents cannot worry. Children must never have to worry about their safety when they go to school. And I've spent a lot of time now going to schools, to high schools and to primary and secondary schools, talking to the children there, and it's amazing how many times they will come to me with a question about, what about safety? I shouldn't have to worry about safety. And it's something that goes far beyond the classroom. It is something that we've got to address early on, and it's something where I believe we need to take more aggressive action from the perspective of providing social services at the sites of schools, something a Republican is trying to get through the legislature at this point, and I support.
Why were you laughing before when the governor was mentioning the visit by Jim Brady?
Because I was waiting to see how long it was going to take him to get assault weapons into this. He seems to matter what the problem is, we go back to assault weapons.
Well, it's a big issue.
It's a very big issue, and he knows that I oppose assault weapons, but he keeps trying to say that I don't.
But you oppose
they're
assault
not
weapons,
in the schools.
but do you approve of the legislation banning most assault weapons in New Jersey?
What I have said is I support that legislation. It is the law of the state. However, and I will say as repeatedly as I have said then, I don't want assault weapons on the street. I don't support assault weapons, but I don't believe that you should make criminals out of people who have guns who have never done anything wrong with them, and I would support grandfathering.
That's called saying in a different way that it's a lousy law, which is what
I don't
Mrs.
think you
Whitman...
spell lousy that way, do you?
Mrs. Whitman has talked about the fact that this is a lousy law. She has talked about putting more weapons back into circulation. We still haven't gotten...
Jim,
we haven't gotten the
don't
definition
start this.
of which...
The question that you asked early on is economic.
Well, she's very troubled about the fact of having her words given back to the last debate. Now, this was a debate before last, when she said that she wanted to put 10% of the weapons that we prohibited in our assault weapon ban back into circulation. She won't tell us which 10%. We're still waiting for which 10%. Well, now that's easy. Now, tomorrow, everybody can go back and find out when she said she supported 90% of the weapons being prohibited.
Well, why don't we clarify it? It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I think it is.
What are you in favor of grandfathering? What kind of
grandfathering, all of them. The only one that I said that I'd look at as one that probably did not belong on the proscribed list are the 22s.
Why would anybody need an assault weapon in New Jersey?
They don't. Absolutely don't.
So why would you grandfather them?
The ones that I believe would be grandfathered, you just don't make criminals out of people unless you're going to compensate. And there's been no provision in this bill for compensation. You know, since that assault weapon ban went into effect, over 400,000 crimes have been committed in our state. Less than 1/10 of them had anything to do with assault weapons. Now, that doesn't mean we want them on the street, but we better understand that the problem of crime goes far further than assault weapons. This makes a nice 30 and 60-second soundbite. It's a wonderful emotional plea, but we better understand that we've got to do something about the economy, about jobs, about education, about hope for the people of the state of New Jersey.
Kind of an interesting transition off of the question as to which weapons we want to be able to
You're for grandfathering all weapons that are out there now.
Right. If they've been obtained legally and the person holding that permit, because, you know, we have a very
Governor,
strict
you're
permit
against
that
that?
takes 8
This
weeks
is the
to do it.
22 that Mrs. Whitman wants to put back in.
Is this a
that
prop
killed
kind of a thing?
A girl in East Orange that Mrs. Whitman says is harmless and wants to bring this one back.
Governor,
the
no,
other
there was a woman
point,
killed
the other
by a
point.
Phillips head screwdriver. Do you want to eliminate those
You see,
too?
I mean, there's a good example of trivializing something that is very important.
No, I believe
if you
you
really don't understand that these weapons are not run-of-the-mill weapons. They're weapons that are designed to kill as many people as possible in the quickest period of time as possible.
If I wanted them all on the street, I could accept this.
I have not yet found out which weapons she wants to put back, other than to have her say she wants to put all of them back in grandfathering. But she's also said now she wants legal some of the ones, 10%, 22s, whatever. And it's mind-boggling. Why you would want to do that is beyond me.
The NRA, your feeling about the NRA as an organization, as a lobbying
I really have none. Unlike the governor, I have never received the NRA endorsement, and I've never accepted contributions from the NRA. National Rifle Association. It's fascinating. When he was a congressman, he was all for it. And he used to take their money and take their endorsement. I've never done that. Individuals who belong, I don't consider everybody who owns a gun a criminal automatically.
Well, crime is a primary concern of the people of New Jersey as well as New York and throughout the country. And I wonder, Ms. Whitman has made a proposal, Governor, for mandatory sentences for people serving 70% of their sentences. Is that correct?
Mandatory. I've made what my proposal is, because I have opposed as the
no
Attorney
parole
General
for
of the
certain
United
violations,
States,
right?
Yes, third-time violent offense, no parole.
Right.
Because, and I'm sure people get confused about this. I mean, the governor gets confused about mandatory minimums come into effect the first time you commit an offense. I have said that my provision is for third-time violent offense, you're gone, no parole, no chance of getting out.
You have to serve 70% of your sentence.
Because right now, for a first offense, because right now it's 20 to 25%
Governor,
is the average.
The reason why people are confused is Mrs. Whitman keeps changing quite a bit. I mean, when I signed the law that said there would be a mandatory 5-year sentence for carjacking. I mean, carjacking is a relatively new brand of street violence. People go in, tear the door open, rip you out of the car, and then steal your car. Mrs. Whitman said that was too tough. we've had, and she said
that
she
again.
would not
the
support
the words you find are
I think it's kind of interesting to understand that what we're talking about is 1 week we're for tougher, other weeks we are not for tougher.
How do you feel about her proposals?
Well, I don't have any difficulty with the whole idea of putting people away who are violent criminals. I'm the one that's advocating that. In fact, Mrs. Whitman was critical of some of the things we did early because you won't have enough jail space if you put these people away. We're building a 3,000 cell state prison because we think if you commit violent crimes, you deserve to go away. Mrs. Whitman has some difficulties with that.
You know, I think maybe it's the governor has such great respect for the truth that he uses it so infrequently. I mean, I really get tired when you say things such as, I've changed on this or changed on that. Governor, you know perfectly well that you should, if you can't understand it, you maybe ought to go back and find out a little bit more about sentencing, but there's a real difference between a mandatory minimum sentence and being tough on offenders. I want to be tough on offenders, and I've said that from the beginning. We need judges who are going to enforce the law, not write the law. We need a death penalty that works. And interestingly enough, in '89, he opposed the very change to the death penalty law that he's now taking credit for, that the Republicans passed, and he signed and is now taking credit for. But back during the campaign in '89, he said, I see no reason to tighten that death penalty law when clearly we need to tighten that.
I have no idea what it is that Mrs. Whitman's talking about.
What do you mean? I could see skepticism in your eyes, Governor.
Again, I mean, Mrs. Whitman was not just a member of...
But she shakes her head and you show skepticism in your eyes.
She is not just a member of, but she's been a member of the Board of Trustees of some organization out in California somewhere that has as its reason for being opposition to the death penalty. And now, all of a sudden...
Janet Reno has belonged, her agencies belong to that
Janet
forever.
Reno's not running for governor.
So you're both there for the death penalty. There's no question about that.
Oh, no question about it.
You agree on that.
Bill Clinton is not running for governor, but he's taking a very hard look at your welfare legislation in which people who have more children stand to lose their benefits. That's a very innovative and also controversial plan, but I think there's a social question here. Is it right for government at any level, whether it be the State House or the House or City Hall, to tell people how many babies they can have?
The answer is if the government is paying for them, yes. Mrs. Whitman regarded my initiative as radical. I mean, she went so far as to call it almost Nazi-like.
We'll have her answer in a moment. Go ahead.
Right.
But the answer is yes, this is about parents taking responsibility for children, not the taxpayers. I mean, we've done a couple of things. Last year, we cracked down on delinquent child support payments to the tune of $440 million. We got 12,000 people off of welfare, saying the radical thing that parents ought to support the children, not the taxpayers.
What is your answer to that?
Well, the governor conveniently overlooks things. He conveniently twists things. I supported welfare reform, and he well knows, because the reason I was recommended by the National Organization of Women Not Enforced was because I supported those welfare reforms, including the proviso that made a woman make a decision about having another child after they went on welfare. What I opposed was his very political, pandering statement that he was going to hurt the children. He made a final statement. Fathers have got to support their children, not just financially, but emotionally as well. And as the first woman governor of the state of New Jersey, no one's going to be tougher on deadbeat dads than I am, and I have supported that. But there's already federal legislation that takes away welfare benefits from women who don't identify the fathers. We have an entire division with the Department of Human Services that identifies that. The vast majority of the women identify. Those who can't because they either don't know the name, address, and place of business, which is what they have to identify, of the father, or they're really legitimately scared that they could suffer spousal abuse or some form of abuse, physical abuse, if they were to identify. So what he did is he targeted the women in that statement that he made about making it harsher. The victims were going to be the children because they were the ones that were going to receive no benefits, and the fathers, who were the problem, got nothing.
Governor, this is really stretching a bit. I mean, Mrs. Whitman, in overkill, said in my proposal, what is next on the governor's headlong rush to embrace extreme right-wing radicalism? A program of tattoos for welfare mothers? A badge sewn onto their clothing identifying them as welfare recipients? How about involuntary relocation into camps? Now, I mean, if that's not overkill, I don't know what is.
You think that's overkill?
Well, talk about changing the subject.
We're
talking about what? That? No, yeah. I think it's overkill to say that you're going to throw the children on the street, that you're going to take away any of the benefits. Because, you know, the governor may not understand this, but you can't pay your rent with Medicaid. You can't pay your rent with food stamps. The women already lose the welfare benefits if they don't identify the father. That's federal legislation. We're working with them. Don't make those women the target for policy failure.
Well,
if it's
let's
not
find
working
out
well
what
enough.
you're advocating, Governor.
This is not even advocating. This is things we've done already.
Okay, and
We're talking about a statement of a month ago.
yeah, and the statement is that women have to identify the fathers or be denied the benefits?
That's correct. That's correct. And what we're saying is they also have to be required to immunize their children. We have a whole host of things, because we've changed the law now.
But if they're denied their benefits, don't the children suffer?
No, the children get Medicaid, food stamps. What we're saying is that there are 66,000 children in the state who don't have a name associated with their father. I said to you before, and I was very proud of it, last year we collected delinquent child support. You can't collect delinquent child support from fathers whom you don't know. And incidentally, it's interesting, this radical step is now being advocated by the Republicans in Congress. There's a caucus proposal that is exactly identical to what it is that I'm advocating. And I expect the Republicans within the next week or so to come forward publicly saying there should be presumptive identification of the fathers of the children at the hospital. I think that's something
But
that's
you clearly differ with the governor on this? You don't.
I believe fathers have got to be made responsible for their children, but we got to understand. But what I objected to is
so
a month ago, he made a further statement that meant absolutely nothing. It was a political statement. The law is already in effect. He admits it. They've already collected a great deal in child support, and I applaud that.
And that's what. If you don't know who the fathers are.
Well, but that's a program that's already been in effect. What you said a month ago went way further and was going to really impact the children. That's what we've got to understand.
And what was the statement he made a month ago?
When he talked about we were going to deny all every kind of benefit to the mother if she did not identify. You're talking now about that very small percentage who is unable to or legitimately fears for their own physical safety to so do. You've got to recognize that as being real. Some people really have a reason to fear their spouses or their partners.
Mrs. Whitman, which has become characteristic in one of the debates, the first one I guess, said it was 1% of the children who we were talking. It's 25% of that. It is 66,000 children for whom we have no names of the fathers. You obviously can't go forward with collecting delinquent child support if you don't know who you're trying to collect it from.
I have a question that's linked to this issue and the educational issue and the social state of New Jersey. It's a question that's provoked a lot of controversy around the country, in the city of Philadelphia, other big cities as well. Should the state and should counties and school districts condone the distribution of condoms in public schools?
We have a policy in the state, which I support and think should be retained, that allows each school district to make up its mind as to whether it should be distributed, the condoms should be distributed, and in what form. There are a couple of school districts that have allowed that, and they allow it in the form of, I think, the school nurse, that if someone goes to the school.
Well, what's your
the
general
answer is
feeling
random
about
distribution
this?
is something I'm opposed to.
Your opinion?
I have always felt that that was up to the individual school districts, and I would never want to see the state mandate that. I think it's very important, though, that any kind of approach to the distribution of condoms be part of an overall education policy on prevention of unwanted pregnancy, part of overall sex education, one that starts with the understanding that abstinence is the only true way to avoid sexually transmitted diseases or unwanted pregnancies, but doesn't stop there. Goes on to educate children about how to prevent unwanted pregnancies. But that should be
both of you think you're going to be able to convince teenagers that abstinence or people of any age group is the only way to prevent that?
That's why, well, it's absolutely true, and they will admit that if you stop to think of it, but you don't stop there. I don't say stop there. You have to go beyond.
Okay, there's one thing you may not agree on. Just recently, a new issue developed this week. I want to make sure we get this one in. The city of Philadelphia announced that a deal to build a new sports arena had collapsed. And as a result of that, the owner of the Philadelphia 76ers says he might have to take his team elsewhere. In addition, in New York City, New York area, the owner of the Yankees is threatening to take his team to New Jersey.
You handle Philadelphia, I'll handle New York.
You handle the Yankees, I'll take care of Philadelphia. The 76ers owner is saying that he might want to move to South Jersey. Now, some years ago, you talked to him about that. The question being, are you willing to give away the store and taxpayers' money and highway construction and all kinds of benefits to get a professional team to South Jersey?
I think that is something that, while I applaud professional sports, and South Jersey certainly could use a professional sports team, it would be wonderful to have them in South Jersey, and I would do anything that I could as governor to encourage it through tax incentives. I would not want to extend the bonded indebtedness of the people of the state of New Jersey without going to them first and seeing whether they would accept that.
Would you fight hard for the Sixers?
Well, the answer is, as you say before, we've talked with the Flyers in the past, and the question, are we going to give away the store? The answer is no. Are we willing to negotiate with people who cross the river, both rivers? The answer is yes. Are we having conversations with Harold Katz, who's the 76ers person? We've had some preliminary discussions.
Recently?
Recently. And again, nothing will happen unless it's in the interest of the people of the state of New Jersey, particularly the South Jersey folks who already root for the 76ers. And it's a possibility.
What about the New York Yankees? George Steinbrenner, the owner, has been threatening to leave the Bronx because Yankee Stadium doesn't have the amenities he thinks his organization needs. Are you prepared to make a serious offer to lure the Yankees across the river?
Lure, no. Are we prepared to sit and talk if Mr. Steinbrenner decides he wants to leave? The answer is yes. We have world-class facilities, public service electric
Have you been
gas.
negotiating with them already?
There have been some preliminary discussions, but again, I have to have some certainty that someone is really serious, as opposed to trying to leverage New Jersey against Manhattan.
Wouldn't it be sacrilegious to change the name to the New Jersey Yankees?
Well, we're New Jersey Giants. We have the New Jersey Jets. What's wrong with having New Jersey Yankees?
I wish we did. I wish those names said New Jersey on them, because they should, with what they get from
I've had
New
this
Jersey.
conversation with Governor Cuomo.
How far are you
all
willing
the
to
time.
go to get the Yankees? Are you willing to raise
if they're
money
interested,
through a bond issue or something like
If they're
that?
interested in coming, it can be done. I say we have a world-class sports complex. There's land that's there. What we have to do is have certainty that someone wants to leave the Bronx. If they're going to leave the Bronx, they'll come to Jersey. They're not going to go anywhere else.
What about you as governor? Would you be prepared to give away the store?
No, I certainly wouldn't, and I don't approve of, would not allow the same kind of thing that happened earlier on in this administration when the Sports and Exposition Authority expanded its bonded indebtedness now to take in the good faith and credit of the state of New Jersey without going to the voters first. That's why I think it's so important that anything we do, the governor can sit and negotiate and show a team that we're willing and that we want to work with them, we want to have them there, we will talk about tax incentives, but as far as bonded indebtedness is concerned, that's got to go to the voters first.
Do you agree with that, Governor? Well,
I mean, it's interesting that one of the reasons why I suspect I got the endorsement of the Building Trades Council is that their folks are up building the Rutgers Stadium. Their folks are down building the Atlantic City Convention Center. Both of those were done in the way that Mrs. Whitman apparently disapproves
without
of.
going to the public.
Both of them are projects of tremendous importance. They are projects that generated jobs. Rutgers, the whole Rutgers community.
Would you be willing to do it for the Yankees?
Well, as I say, we want to see what anybody's proposal is. If they're going to come and say they want to come
You're
here.
not shutting the door on floating a bond issue.
Absolutely not shutting the door on anything, but anything we do will be equally as responsible as the actions we took.
Without public approval?
Well, to bring the Rutgers Stadium, to develop it in the way we are, as well as the convention center.
Which was done without public approval, so I guess that's the answer to the question you asked.
So there is a difference here between you.
Absolutely. I would want it to go to the public. The public has a right to express how they want their money spent on bonded indebtedness. That's always been the policy of our state. Unfortunately, we've been seeing that adhered to less and less recently.
Well, it's interesting to note that this last summer, we had $250 million worth of monies that were available with the concurrence of the Republican legislature for improving our schools, and we put a whole host of people to work. That was not submitted to the general public because the legislature felt, as they felt, that the Sports Authority initiatives for the Rutgers Stadium and the Convention Center were not only appropriate, but legitimate, and were a good investment for the people of this state.
There seems to be a visceral sort of partisan difference here, philosophical difference.
It can't be partisan because the Republican legislature has been working with me to put these projects into effect.
They were not part of the Sports and Exposition Authority bond issue.
Well, I bet you if you go back and look.
That was passed at about 2 in the morning on the last, well, excuse me, just before midnight on the last day of the Democrat legislature.
With bipartisan support and the majority of Republicans voting in favor of it.
That brings us to an interesting issue here. You know, as governor, you have tremendous powers. The late mayor of Philadelphia, Frank Rizzo, once said, when they complained about patronage, they said, who am I going to give contracts to? My enemies? So obviously you give contracts to your friends in politics. The question I would like to know from you, since you have not been the governor, is what kind of process do you go through before you award major and lucrative state contracts? And how does that happen?
Every
do that?
award of contract should be done on a bidding process to the lowest competent bidder. And any award of contract should be able to stand the light of public scrutiny. You should be able to say, why is this law firm part of this? Why is this bonding house part? And be able to justify to the public how that money has been awarded. We should not have things, as we've recently seen, allegations of a no-bid contract. $110,000 to one firm. A former cabinet member of the governor's went back to his old department and received a $110,000 contract, or at least that's alleged, and hasn't done any work at all. That kind of thing can't be allowed to happen.
Suggesting that we have a ghost employee here?
Well, I wouldn't want to suggest that, but it certainly seems that way. They
But
can't
that's a very
allege.
serious allegation.
Well, it is, and in fact, that's being investigated as well right now.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that there has been no contract that has been ruled illegal in the same way that the contract that Mrs. Whitman put through in the 11th hour of her tenure at the head of the Board of Public Utilities was ruled illegal, saying that competitive bidding was consciously thwarted. This was a transfer of land from a water company to a developer. This is wetlands up in the northern portion of the state in Bergen County. We are now, ironically enough, working very hard to preserve the highlands, to preserve the wetlands and the water recharging areas. These are the same areas that this deal that went through by the court was the focus of.
Yes?
Well, I just love to respond to that because there are two parts of it, and I think you know this, Governor, that first of all, the court's decision was based primarily on language that I had said outlining the intent of the decision, which was to keep that land forever green. The court found that there were better ways of doing it, and they could tighten the language, and I'm all for it, because the land stayed forever green. The other interesting part is I talked to the governor's soon-to-be president of my board, and I asked him, I said, do you want to make this decision? Because it is a major one. Would your administration like to make the decision? And Scott Wiener said no, and he's admitted that in the press, that we had this conversation. There was no backdoor sneaking in of this decision. It was one that was made with consensus from this administration as well. And now what the courts has found, they can keep, there are better ways of keeping this land green, but the bottom line is the land was never, ever developed.
Nice try. I mean, tomorrow, it'll be interesting for the rest of the day and into tomorrow, everyone will be running back to the court decision, reading the clear language that says that the bidding laws were circumvented and that, in fact, this whole deal was a nullity because it had not been followed through upon in the way that the law provided for. So, you know, that's fine. We'll read about that one tomorrow in terms of what the reality is.
Ms. Whitman, on to the 30% income tax cut that you've been pushing very hard for, and you've been attacked for not being specific as to how you're going to find at least $1 billion that you're going to need in savings in order to finance this 30% tax cut. Do you think that you have lacked specifics?
No, Gabe, I think I've put out as many specifics as you've seen from anyone in this position who is not controlling the reins of government. It's interesting, the governor says this absolutely can't be done because he doesn't believe in the ability to cut government spending. The only time it's on his watch is over his veto. We're talking about the need to find $1.2 billion in the first 17 months of my administration. Right now on his desk are recommendations from an audit that was performed in 1993 outlining $500 million in proposed savings that could be realized by these suggestions were implemented. We start there. By limiting the rate of growth of state government to 3% instead of allowing it to grow at 2 and twice or close to 2.5 times the rate of inflation as this governor has allowed, you can realize $500 million in savings. That's $1 billion there. This year's budget ends with $400 million surplus. You take it to $200 million and you found 1.2, and that doesn't allow from the stimulation of growth that will occur from cutting taxes, because I don't believe in putting those numbers in because they're speculative.
But the governor points out that the income tax is used to keep the property taxes
what the governor
down.
Doesn't seem to
he
understand,
says, fasten your seatbelt,
well,
we're going to take you for a ride, meaning you're going to take us for a ride.
There are two things here. Yeah. First of all, while the income tax is dedicated to trying to mitigate the property tax, it's not the only way you do that. And by cutting government spending, you provide more monies that can go to stabilize and keep the property tax stable. Secondly, for the governor to say this after he raised income tax $2.8 billion and property tax didn't go down. He had a press conference last week to say how great it was that property tax had only gone up 4% when property values have gone down in our state for the first time in 4 decades, 2 years back to back.
Governor, you've been smiling.
Well, I mean, read all the editorial endorsements today that all go in large measure to the question of credibility and this plan that Mrs. Whitman has been waving around. I mean, you've got a situation where Mrs. Whitman is saying, and it's $1.5 billion lost with her promising everybody they're going to get 30%. People in cities apparently will get 50%. Letters going out saying you'll get $1,000 in your pocket. All the money that comes from the income tax is required by the operation of the Constitution to go into a fund, and the only use you can use of that money is for property tax relief. Everyone is arriving at the conclusion that what this plan really is a shell game. We're going to lift property taxes, and we're going to see them go back to the 80s, where they were going up by 12 to 15% per year. We have been able to bring them down. The last 3 years, the average is 2.7%. And
but I understand it's gone up 4% this year.
Well, 4% and 1.8% the previous year. So, I mean, for the average time, we're talking about 2.7% as contrasted with 12 to 15%. Don't take my word for it. Go talk to the mayors. The mayors understand it. I got endorsed by the firemen the other day, and they say, we're terrified by this thing. If you start cutting municipal assistance, we know that public safety, police and fire, consumes about 60% of the municipal aid. It's going to mean you're going to have less policemen, less firemen, or if you want to keep the same numbers, you have to go back to the property taxpayer. So, I mean, this is almost not able to really be disputed. That's the inevitable result.
Let's continue a conversation here.
Absolutely, because the governor is doing exactly what he did when the Republicans cut the sales $600 million in revenue and reduced his spending projections by $1.1 billion. He was out there saying that parks were going to close and people were going to lose their jobs and the elderly were going to be thrown out on the street, and it didn't happen. He just doesn't understand that you have to control the rate of growth of state government. There are other monies that you can put toward offsetting the property tax, and for him to say that it's wonderful property taxes have gone down when property values have gone down, people are losing their homes. 1 out of every 40 families with a house and a mortgage now is facing foreclosure. That's not a record of which I'd want to be proud.
There's one thing I don't get, though. I mean, I keep seeing these commercials and hearing comments about the governor's helicopter, and outside of the governor's helicopter, what are your specific plans to streamline state government? I mean, what do you do specifically to streamline state government?
I've outlined, as I've said already, in easy ones, at $200 million. I mean, if you stop the double dipping, the double coverage, not double dipping, double coverage of health insurance by state employees, that's up to $50 million. If you get rid of the political pay positions that this governor has been so free with, you can save up to $70 million. There's a whole list. There are $500 million worth of cuts listed in his own audit report. Well, he keeps saying nobody's endorsed my plan. Wall Street Journal knows a little something about economics. They've endorsed it. 4 governors have endorsed it. There were editorials today in my favor that also endorsed this. We've had the small business people. You should be out with me, Jim, going around as I did this last 3 days, talking to the people of the state of New Jersey who have come to me and said, my child doesn't have a job, or I don't have a job. I'm going to lose mine. I can't afford taxes. Yeah. It's not a question of if, it's when.
Let's have the governor respond to that.
This is interesting. Now this is the 3rd debate. We now have the 3rd example. The first debate was, of course, we're going to save hundreds of $1,000s of Adidas sneakers. We don't have Adidas sneakers. We don't have LA Gear
yes, we do,
either.
Jim.
The second debate was we were going to sell the helicopter. That somehow I was responsible for the helicopter. Governor Kean bought the helicopter. I didn't buy the helicopter. Now we have this whole question about double premiums on health insurance for state employees. 2/3 of the state employees are in the state financed health insurance program. State is a self-insurer. There are no premiums paid by the state to the state.
You're talking about Ms. Whitman's contention that there are double premiums being paid.
Well, the 2/3 of the employees don't pay any premiums at all because the state does not pay premiums to itself. So, I mean, here's another example. The clear way of resolving this is for Mrs. Whitman to submit a list, $1.5 billion worth of reductions, not generalized efficiencies, not Adidas sneakers, but a real list, and she's not going to be able to do that because if she did it, we'd all see that the only place you can go to, municipal aid, school aid, and homestead rebates. When she said before there was no pain as a result of the penny back last year, go talk to the 2.2 million people who either lost the whole $500 rebate or many who went 500 down to 90. Go talk to the senior citizens who had their co-pays go up on their pharmaceutical assistance by 150%. That's how we paid for that penny back. If Mrs. Whitman is saying she's going to cut $1.5 billion out of the budget, then we'll really have some serious problems.
Well, it's clear the governor just does not see how you can make any cuts in government. And for him to talk about the homestead rebate when his administration has so botched and has frightened now so many seniors are totally confused about what they can or can't do. I mean, it's not something that I have talked about because I don't think it's fair to try to heighten fear. But this is administrative bungling, that's all. And that's the kind of thing for which he has to answer. But really the question should be to him, what is his plan for the next 4 years? I mean, the fact that we've lost 280,000 jobs in the last 3.5 years, the fact that we're behind the nation in every major economic indicator, the question has to be to Jim Florio, what are you going to do for the next 4 years? How are you going to make this up to
let
people?
me try to respond to that. But before that, I mean, it was interesting. Mrs. Whitman now tries to do a vicious pilot on not being involved in scaring the senior citizens. She was waving in the newspaper the other day that the Republican leaders have been quoted as, don't go cash your check. If you got a senior citizen's homestead rebate, don't cash at the banks. The answer is, first of all, let me use a public service announcement opportunity. Cash your check. If you got your check, you're a senior citizen, the homestead rebate checks are all good, notwithstanding what some of our friends are trying to concern yourselves about. But I think it's a strange thing to be doing this self-protection. We bragged last year about giving back the penny. And then what happens when all the impact of giving back the penny comes, you don't want to have any responsibility.
So you're
for
accusing Ms. Whitman of engaging in scare tactics for the senior citizens.
Well, the last two, the legislative leaders, and then Mrs. Whitman jumped on as well.
Now I'm the legislative leaders. I love this.
Well, they're all supporting you. They're all working for you. They are trying to throw up some camouflage for the whole process of what it is they did last year.
Yeah, let's talk.
These seniors are being hurt. People are being hurt.
Let's talk this personality or character issue again. Ms. Whitman, the governor's campaign has emphasized that you come from a rich patrician and by implication and by direct inference, he suggested that your background puts considerable distance between you and the working class and middle class families that he feels closer to because of his background. Is there any truth to that?
No, I think it's a real shame that the governor felt that he had to do this, and he was so uncertain of his record. And I loved it at the last debate, I think it was, he said he didn't take any kind of salary increase, didn't take the full salary increase to which he was entitled, and he didn't. He only takes $85,000 in direct salary, but he neglected to mention that he gets a $75,000 account, which is treated as income.
But does your background put
expense.
Considerable distance between you and the
No, not at all. I have
the
not
majority?
found out about. I have spent the last 3.5 years talking to people, and you should have been with me in the last 3 days on this bus tour. People, it's not how much is in your bank account. They didn't hold that against Frank Lautenberg or Tom Kean or John Kennedy. It's, are your programs the types of programs that are going to make their lives better and easier? And they've been hurt these last 3.5 years.
Haven't you been unfair, Governor, in pointing to Ms. Whitman's relative wealth as a disqualifying factor? Aren't there qualities like concern for other human beings?
Mrs. Whitman just put it very
compassion.
Well. Are her policies in accord with the values and the goals of average people? And the answer is no. I mean, it's interesting. Today, on the Star-Ledger's front page, there is a very nice fatal accidents involving drunks plunge in New Jersey. Mrs. Whitman, on page 8 of her crime blueprint, is talking about watering down the drunk driving laws. Now, if that is not out of step with what the people of our state are insisting upon, we've been cracking down on drunk driving, and we're getting results. The Attorney General today is quoted as saying that we have had an astronomical decrease in drunk driving. Why would you want to do what Mrs. Whitman has been talking about doing? What she's been saying is that the law now says if you get convicted of drunk driving, the law now is that you lose your license for 6 months. She says, no, we don't want to have that happen. We want to be able to allow people to go get a special colored license, purple or maroon or something, and they'll have this license plate and they'll be able to drive, notwithstanding the fact that they would have, under the existing law, have lost their license. She says that she doesn't want to inconvenience people. I mean, you talk about Mothers Against Drunk Driving that we've been with, have been working very hard with us. The PTAs have been working hard with us because people get killed by drunk drivers, don't get a second chance.
I think we need a response on that.
Yeah. You certainly do, because this is what the governor has done throughout this campaign. He's tried to take positions, and he's taken positions of mine, twisted them, and tried to create a fear tactic. As a mother, particularly of teenagers, there's no way I want drunk drivers on the street. And the proposal that I said we ought to look at is one that was first, it's currently in effect in Ohio. It was first offered by the Fraternal Order of Police in this state, and it would allow the judge the discretion on first-time DWI offenders only.
Driving while intoxicated.
Yes, driving while intoxicated, but for first-time DWI offenders in Ohio, it's only after completion of a rehabilitation course to allow them to have a specially designated license plate to enable them to get to and from work so they stay off welfare or off unemployment lines. And it is only at the judge's discretion. It's the problem we have now is too many times the police don't know. People get on the roads, when they're on the revoked list, They get on the road driving. The police have no way of identifying. This way, they don't even have a special tag. It has the hours that that car can be on the road, and the police can easily identify when that car is where it shouldn't be.
Christine Whitman's Blueprint for Crime Prevention
Absolutely.
proposal. Special license plates should be issued to those whose licenses are for driving while intoxicated.
First-time DWI offenders up to the discretion of the judge. Jim, come on.
She's talking about inconvenience. You're supposed to be inconvenienced.
Well, you both accused each other in this program of revising or revisionist policies, revising the other person's position. Just briefly
I'm glad
here.
to see you've read it, though.
Just briefly here.
See, you get a lot in it.
Let's talk about political correctness. It's become a major issue, and there are schools in New Jersey, school districts, universities, colleges, public and private, that are in some cases doing their own revisionist policies of revising history, Afrocentric studies. Political correctness has suddenly become a buzzword and controversy in our society, and should we be doing this? Should a governor of a state or a state education department be more careful about what's going on in our schools?
We have to be very, very careful of on the part of government. While we want to ensure and celebrate the diversity in our cultural heritage, and it's why I support education that would talk about genocide and the Holocaust. That's something I think needs to be there, but we need to understand that bias has no place in the schools. I am deathly afraid should we start to get into censorship government policy.
Just briefly, Governor.
I haven't got any difficulty with anything Mrs. Whitman just said.
Let me ask you this. Are you reconciled, Ms. Whitman, to the possibility of losing? That you could lose this campaign?
I haven't even thought about that, but I'll tell you one thing, Gabe. If I would be, and people are certainly told me that out there in the street, I'm going to stay in this state and stay active in this state and stay involved with the issues that are important to the state I love.
You said to somebody recently, were I to lose, it's not the end of the world.
Right. I believe in this state there are a lot of ways that you can contribute, and I will continue to contribute to the state.
Could I ask you the same question, Governor? Are you reconciled to losing this
I've been
campaign?
in elections in which I have won. I've been in elections in which I've lost. Sort of like Sophie Tucker, I've been rich and poor. Winning is better. Yeah, I'm working very hard trying to explain the differences between myself and Mrs. Whitman. I think they are startling differences, and I think that people are entitled to know, who wants to water down drunk driving, who doesn't. The assault weapon ban is almost a metaphor.
But are you philosophical about the possibility of losing?
Well, again, what I'm going to do is to work.
You were a pugilist once, you were a fighter, you must have lost a few.
Lost some fights in the past. One of the things one has to do is to think about the long haul, think about the 10 rounds, think about getting up when you get knocked down. I think I've got a fairly good track record about getting up.
Is there anything that you two, and we only have a little time in this portion of it, found about each other that you like? Is there anything you like?
I don't just like Mrs. Whitman.
No, but I mean, is there anything about her program that you like?
Well, again, you heard today a couple of things that you've asked that I subscribe to. The points that she raised before, there was no point in arguing with her.
You think she'd be a good governor candidate if you weren't running here?
Well, I guess my only difficulty is really the policies. I have some serious problems with the policies.
What about you? Do you find anything about Jim Florio that you admire about his programs, about his vision for the future?
Again, as Jim Florio said, I don't dislike him, and nobody does everything all wrong, and there are lots of programs that have gone on, things that were implemented, started earlier, that have been implemented and taken to fruition that I think are good programs. There's no question about that.
What person in your early life, Governor, would you say had the greatest influence on you?
Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy came to Trenton in 1968 when I was there. He spoke at the old armory. It's since been torn down. And he just was, he was serene in his idealism, and yet he had a good balance of idealism and realism. He was a great inspiration to me.
My parents, because they were very dedicated to this process of government. They always said that good government was the best politics, that this system deserved the best, and that's what they gave it.
Thank you very much. Our time is up, and now, in a predetermined order by a coin flip, it's not the way elections are usually decided. Ms. Whitman, a last word to the voters?
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for offering us this opportunity and the voters this opportunity to again see the differences between the governor and I and to try to decide what his plans are for the future. This election is a critically important one. It's about people. It's about jobs. The economic recovery package that I've put forward is one that says I have faith in the people of New Jersey. And to the extent that we can allow them to keep their hard-earned taxpayer dollars in their own pockets, they'll spend it wisely, more wisely than government, certainly. And that in turn creates jobs. We've seen it happen over and over again. That's why John Kennedy cut taxes in 1963, because it works. What he didn't have and what I will have as governor is the ability to stop the rate of growth of government spending. It takes committing to the future. This election is all about the future. It's about the children and women in the state of New Jersey. We can make this the great that it always has been and deserves. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm here to share some thoughts. This is an election that has been about the differences between two very different sets of values. When I talk about the fact we've got a lousy law, when we talk about the fact that we take pride, go back to the old days, it's a big value difference. I'm working very hard to be able to reduce at least property taxes. Mrs. Whitman offers a plan that inevitably is going to increase property taxes. So these are things that I think people are starting to take the measure of us about. I guess if it comes down to the bottom line, people will determine who has the willingness, ability for making hard decisions, and who doesn't want any part of responsibility. Who has the credibility to be the governor in these tough times, and who has no credibility. I'm pleased that, that we've been able to deal with the problems that we have, and I'm looking forward to another 4 years of
Time's up, Governor. Thank you, Ms. Whitman and Governor Florio, for being with us today, and thank you, Larry Kean of KYW, for joining us in this cooperative effort between your station, KYW in Philadelphia, and WNBC here in New York. A program simulcast live in both cities. Good luck to both of you. Gabe, good afternoon.
Well done.